this program, this weekend, has a title, right? It's entitled, it has a theme. And the theme goes as Flowing Wakefulness, right? Neuro-Physiological basis of enlightenment. It has this main theme, Flowing Wakefulness, and subtitle, Neuro-Physiological basis of enlightenment. So we thought that it would be good to revisit this theme, which I have been addressing quite a bit in the earlier days, especially when I began to speak in California, as far as 2012, when I first held group meetings and retreats, and when I was speaking at the conference. It felt necessary to bring about the importance of the body into the overall scene, which was kind of which was dominated, if you will, by that perspective that there is nobody. There's nobody. There's no body. Because this was maybe still at the final phase of that global movement that Satsang-movement is known for, Non-Duality as a movement known for. And when we say Satsang-movement and Non-Duality, we're not just speaking about couple teachers teaching here, couple teachers teaching here. It's a global phenomenon. What's the difference between yoga and non-duality? Just to give us a little context before we move into our theme. This is just for your general interest to position yourself where and how all this sits together. Yoga obviously was nice, clean, wooden floor spaces with yoga mats laid out and people doing stretches, correct? Right? Whether this was in Manhattan and whether this was in Primrose Hill in London, these yoga studios became abundant. Some of them became franchised. Franchised, like maybe not at the level of Starbucks coffees, but certainly there were many, many studios around, New York, LA, other European cities. Whereas non-duality was a very different animal. There was no yoga mats spread around, but mostly people sitting simply on the chairs, and a speaker or teacher will be guiding that event, which would be called satsang in 99% of cases maybe. It simply would be called a satsang. Satsang is a Sanskrit word, right? Gathering in the name of truth, or the company of the wise, or what have you. Sat, Sangha. Sat, truth, Sangha is a group of people, as a community. So it's gathering in the name of truth, right? Communal gathering, or in the company of truth. There's various translations. Best to have all of them in mind. So satsang is a movement. When we say that, I often mention that you can Wikipedia and look at it. Google and look at the Wikipedia page. And there's an entrance called Satsang-movement. And it is a movement that swept across the world, mostly in Anglo-Saxon countries, but it made its detours into other countries, into the Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, Russia, Latin countries. And in Germany, you have enjoyed a string of very, very prominent teachers, some of whom are now behind the organizing of that Advaita Congress, which is to take place in Vienna at the very end of this month. The word non-duality is an English term which simply means, as the word presupposes, non-duality. Duality means two, dual. Non-duality means not two. And it's a loose translation of the Sanskrit term Advaita. Dvaita means two. Advaita means negation of that. the term, the letter R in Sanskrit alphabet, whenever it is put in front of the term, it negates its meaning, it becomes non. So it's not two. So non-duality, it's a kind of, if you will, Western interpretation, Western analogy, Western answer to that what Advaita has always been known in the country where the term comes from. There is another term that is equally became used and kind of in circulations, but slightly more specific, Neo-Advaita. Non-duality and Neo-Advaita. Neo means new, obviously. Neo-Advaita. This term is chiefly in relation to the way it is being interpreted in the West only. It has nothing to do with India, even though India has seen many Western teachers going and bringing Neo-Advaita into the Indian soil. It became at some point almost an interesting phenomenon. In the earlier decades, at the end and throughout the second half of the 20th century, only Oriental, Eastern, Indian teachers went to the West. And Westerners went to India in search of knowledge, in search of spiritual practices, in search of spiritual guides, and so forth. But the 90s and turn of the century, and especially, as I said, the first 10 years of this century, has seen another phenomena. Western teachers would come to India to teach what is specific to this culture, but with that new take, the Neo-Advaita making it its detour to the country of origin. You can look this up yourself, just as a reference points, if you are interested. Not that it's required, but I'm just saying that many Western teachers went and taught of different ages, of different kinds. You know, very, very newbies, people who just claim to awaken or have some shift in perception, went and taught in India in these legendary places like Tirunamalai, which is associated with the ashram of Ramana Maharshi, who is being held as the highest authority on the Advaita. He is being held, if you will, as the highest apostle of the Advaitic teaching, Ramana Maharshi. And it is not surprisingly that those who claim the lineage to Ramana Maharshi, whether through Papaji or through some other lineages like Ramesh Balsikar and some other maybe lineages, they claim to have that direct association, therefore they are fit to teach that. But this is, we're speaking about it from the perspective of that introspection, in that introspective glance of what was taking place up till now. Whether non-duality is a correct, accurate interpretation of the Advaita Vedantic teaching, it's beside the point at the moment. Because this has been addressed already by us on several occasions, including, I would maybe rephrase it, from mild positive criticism to most severe critical analysis of the differences between what Advaita per se represents, how it sits culturally, where it comes from, what part and what phase of the journey it represents, versus how it has been interpreted in the West. But what is of interest to us is that there is this movement, there's this attempt, there is this propensity. It's like this very sacred knowledge is now reaching the masses, or has that intention behind, to be offered to the masses. And that's the phenomenology, if you will, of the Satsang movement, because it was immensely popular immensely. But just as I said, if you were mostly around these yogic circles, whether smack in the center of it or on the periphery of it, you may have missed this whole non-duality scene. Because, as I said, it's not always overlapped in its groups, territories, and approaches. Because yoga was taught from that physical aspect of yoga, emphasizing, or rather utilizing, only the limb of yoga, which is known as asana. If a little bit of pranayama was thrown there, here and a little meditation there, it was insignificant to be counted as yoga per se. And we know that because the, greater authorities on yoga, those who are worth their salt in this business, have begun to raise their voice as early as the 90s. Already in the 90s, some of the most well-known teachers, proponents of various branches of Indian philosophy, began to speak out loud about the way yoga being taught in the West, that this is not a yoga at all. It's just an aspect of yoga, or utilizing a certain aspect, certain limb of yoga, utilized for therapeutic benefits that it certainly has. And there were, of course, the proponents and the critics of that approach. Whereas 90s has seen the reevaluation and the first voices were raised as whether yoga at all being practiced in the way it is being taught, conceived. I'm not even going to say revealed, because the term revealed is not accepted by scholars in the field. If you tell the Indologists that sacred holy books of those who consider themselves now belonging to the Hindu culture somehow claim that these texts have been revealed in the expanded state of consciousness, they will do exactly these things, that this could only be spoken in inverted commas, because this perspective is still spoken from where the agreement on the primacy of spirit over matter is not a solved affair. So the scholars in the field, those ethnographers who go to study another culture, in this case, who have been studying and interpreting freely this culture that we're speaking of now, do not accept these texts as having divine origin. Is that clear? It's like someone would say that Quran and Bible is just an invention of people, is a byproduct of imagination. Verstehen? It's very important. If it, because it's, it's like removing that. It's removing the culture from its direct connection to the spirit, because it's then being simply viewed as the byproduct of imagination. Folk stories, at best epics. Do you see the difference? Do you understand the difference? It's a vast difference. If in a given culture, and India is not just like some culture, India is a one and the only, forgive me, don't take it for granted, please, do your own research. But I would say, India is one and the only culture that has the most uninterrupted record of the investigation into the domain of consciousness for millennia. There's no other culture that could claim that. There are amazing cultures around there, amazing civilizations that lived, flourished, and perished. But India remains to be one and the only country which survived not centuries, millennia of various transformations on the social political level, whilst remaining true to the very principal ideals which are ingrained in the very, very fabric of this culture. And that is the affair of a human being with the divine. The very premises of Indian culture are based on that. It doesn't matter what Indians think of themselves today. It doesn't matter how fragmented culture has been left to gather itself after the centuries of being the subject to colonization. And the worst colonization, of course, was the last one, because the Raj, the British Raj, did that kick in the womb of the culture by removing and trying systematically to remove the access of people from the source of their power, because that was the only way to conquer that culture, that country, and that civilization. There was no other way to conquer it. So in order to conquer it, that what is now returning back into the West as the salvation, Ayurveda is now being seen as one and the only truly holistic system. Yes, it is still being argued that how and what to do with all this, how can it come into this complex network of system of health, which includes, well, a lot of aspects, right? Just think about it. It's not just how the patient is being treated. It's just one aspect, one facet. It's the whole thing. Insurance companies, pharmacological companies, right? Proliferation from deadly diseases, in fact, keeps spinning the research at that level where successful pill is the solution, not a balanced way of life. So not to kind of make it too, paint it with a brush stroke, because I'd like to simply keep this as that wide perspective of what we are set to talk about this weekend. But one way or the other, that cultural prerogative that is being applied by one culture to another continues. And maybe non-duality is where this has been less obvious, concealed somehow by the otherwise its very noble premises and promises. Because non-duality, it's not a Western phenomena. Any teacher who tries to make it sound otherwise simply doesn't know what she or he is talking about, because the movement of non-duality was initiated by those, very few, by the way, teachers, who always claimed their connection, deep, intimate connection, through the link to India's prime masters. And the above mentioned Ramana Maharshi is being held as that unquestionable authority. Of course, you here in Europe and in Germany, by and large, not that, let's say, privy to this insiders information, insiders talk. But if you were, let's say, attending retreats in California, in the United States, and kind of have seen that scene, as some of us did, and as I did myself, where I even spoke at several conferences, not several conferences, it's the same conference with the name Science and Non-Duality. Science and Non-Duality, an enterprise which rose on the wave of non-duality movement and came into manifestation only just over 10 years ago. where these conferences, which were a yearly event in California, as well as its counterpart in Europe in a smaller scale, is the very, very gathering of many, many different teachers who in the earlier days were all united by that, more or less more homogeneously united by that very perspective what non-duality is known for, where teacher essentially positions the audience, the speaker, back to the direct experience. Hopefully that is the case, because that's what some of the key teachers have been doing by applying the key methodology that non-duality worked with, known as the process of self-inquiry. The process of self-inquiry, where one is inquired directly into the nature of one's experience, with the assistance of some of the canonical way of how it is done. The question here, known as who am I? Who am I? There are, I'm sure, books around in different languages. It's the term which was not, by the way, invented by Ramana Maharshi at all, as in some places erroneously been stated, just as some of the postulates attributed to Ramana Maharshi don't belong to Ramana Maharshi. The famous postulate is the world is unreal, Brahman is real, the world is Brahman. Often attributed to Ramana Maharshi, in fact belongs to 8th century sage, Indian sage, Adi Shankara. So in other words, when I first came to California and began to speak, I used to kind of remind the crowds, which were much more intimately familiar. Many people, I would say 70% of people in the audience will always be from those who have been attending these non-dual gatherings, satsangs, for many, many, many years, with many, many, many teachers. Like just the Bay Area of San Francisco is known for variety of smaller towns, right, surrounding that greater Bay Area, from size of Freiburg to smaller to bigger, right, where these gatherings are being held. And the groups rose that organize these gatherings, not just the conference, but like regular gatherings, regular groups. There's Non-Duality America, there's, organization. There are various forms and groups, very well organized. So when people would come in order to, again, to kind of have some entrance point, because I was new to the scene, I would remind that when it comes to the teachings of Advaita or non-duality, if someone is familiar with the work of Adi Shankara, then there is nothing that Ramana Maharshi taught is new. There's nothing. If you know the work of Adi Shankara, then you would, if you were to read Ramana Maharshi's discourses, then it will simply be a repositioning of the same truth. A repositioning of the same truth. Repositioning of the same truth pertinent to the angle of understanding of what Vedanta, now we're using this term for the first time, is known for. Because the term Advaita does not exist in India. The term Neo-Advaita and the term non-duality does exist in the West. But where it comes from, the culture where it comes from, the word Advaita simply doesn't exist without the word Vedanta. It has to be, it has to accompany something. It has to be next to something. And it is in association with Vedanta. And in fact, in the earlier days, in the days when Adi Shankara postulated its most important sayings, there was no term Advaita. It came later. It was simply known as Vedanta. Vedanta is a Sanskrit term which simply translates as culmination of the known, or culmination of the knowledge, if you will. Well, here it's an interesting thing because it's a culmination of the knowledge or the known, but how and what, best not to rush into these conclusions. The term culmination here is a better translation than what is more often Vedanta is interpreted as. More often Vedanta is interpreted as the end of knowledge, the end. And this could be confusing. It is much more helpful to have a closer interpretation of that term, Vedanta. In fact, if we are to give now this term a true scrutiny, the term Vedanta contains the word Veda, Vedanta. Veda means knowledge in Sanskrit. And Veda also means pertaining to knowledge. It's a science. It's part of the Vedic civilization, Vedic culture. So it's not the end of the Vedas, how often it is also translated, even by eminent scholars, surprisingly enough. It's the culmination of the Vedas. The Vedas that precede Advaita Vedanta culminate in Advaita Vedanta. The Vedas that precede. And in the whole exposition within the scope of Indian philosophy, Vedanta stands as the last, but not in isolation, never in isolation. So the classical systems of Indian philosophy, 6 of them, known as Nya and Vaisheshik, or Vaisheshika. Nya and Vaisheshika. The first two, the first pair. Then comes Samkhya and Yoga, the second pair. And after that comes Karma Mimamsa and Vedanta. And that is another pair. So altogether, all 6 comprise what is known as darshanas. All these are darshanas. 6 systems of Indian philosophy, known as darshanas. And there is a intimate, direct correlation between all of them. No Indian teacher, no Indian philosopher will just begin to hammer the wisdom of the Advaita Vedanta as a point of entrance into this, what it is known in holistic terms as the totality of knowledge. No. In fact, the way to oneness, because this is yet another term, non-duality is oneness, right? Not two, what is it then? It's one. If it's not two, what it is then? It's not two. One. A state of union. Oneness. The way to oneness is through duality. It's through duality, through polarity. So therefore, within the scope of Indian philosophy, it is the Samkhya philosophy that holds its primacy, as well as its practical use in a daily basis of its people. And it is of no surprise that it is Samkhya that forms basis for all those applied Vedic sciences. One of them now becoming more and more and more known in the West as Ayurveda. Again, a reminder, because it's been said over and over and over, that if one is to study Ayurveda, one would have to go through a crashed course of Samkhya philosophy, because Ayurveda is based in Samkhya. But Samkhya philosophy is dualistic in its nature. It's not non-dualistic, it is dualistic. And it is dualistic for a purpose. It serves the purpose because it has the important job of deliverance, where the non-self is separated from the self. That's what the goal of Samkhya, the state of Kaivalya, that final state, abiding as Purusha, abiding as that eminent being, is the goal of the Samkhya philosophy, where Prakriti, these two principal categories that Samkhya deal with. Samkhya deals with two principal categories, Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is spirit, changeless spirit, and Prakriti, which is ever-changing, phenomenal existence, nature, in other words. So, the aim of Samkhya is to create this through direct cognition, through direct experience, understanding and cognition of that, what is available in a state of witnessing consciousness. When we are witnessing reality, witnessing state of consciousness, then we literally living this experience directly, where world, whether it is perceived out there through the senses, the external world, or internal world of thoughts and feelings, is being witnessed by that inner eye of the observer. When that happens, we call it witnessing state of consciousness. And that witnessing state of consciousness is a daily affair. Most of you experience that on a daily basis. It's simply very subtle, and we simply don't pay attention to that. In meditation, this becomes more and more acute, more and more direct. In meditation, the phenomenon is witnessed. Everything. Yes, maybe in the phase of this, where one just starting to meditate, just beginning to meditate, then all this somehow is yet doesn't make much sense, because one is still battles with the mind, battles with thoughts, sensations, feelings, and so forth. But the sooner one realizes that the purpose of meditation really is simply to sit and witness it all, and that will suffice for the time being. The purpose of meditation is to witness it. People used to tell me, I want to meditate and I'm suffering, I want to enjoy meditation. But these thoughts, they bother me. Or I come out of meditation, it was a terrible meditation, filled with thoughts. Why was it terrible? It was fantastic. Imagine what you just done, you cleared. Like all these thoughts were like literally flushed out of your system. But if we have some expectations and predispositions, somehow we heard, or been taught or told that proper meditation is to have blank state, no thoughts, no feelings, and just like really transcend it all. Well, that's not helpful, because that's not how it is, and that's not how it works. And yet, when we become more versed in meditation, when we become more experienced, we realize that no meditation is the same. Some meditations, we can go through the phase when we literally encountered that quite a rich, not necessarily in terms of its value, layer of all that information that is just pouring out of ourselves. And it is pouring out more so in meditative states when we are given to sittings. It's not pleasant. Yes, it's not meditation where you are like garden effigy of Buddha, sitting still with a little fountain down there, made out of granite or sandstone. Far from it. There's a lot of things going on. But it doesn't mean that you are not meditating. All it takes is that inner valve, to turn that inner valve, to make that perception, adjustment, that it's not to be upset about it, it's to accept it. Haven't we noticed how that works? We all know how it works in every relationship, right? Up until I'm resisting an argument, up until I'm in a, like crossing heads, and like up until there is this I'm right, you're wrong, or in any relationship, companionship, partnership, romance, anything. When it's head on, and this inner valve, accept, immediately, the whole structure of resistance melts down, there and then. It has nothing to hold on to. And we see how that argument is actually, the very, very basis behind that argument is deflated. It's almost ridiculous to even carry on in that mode. What happened? Nothing happened. We may still have ideas about I'm still right, he is still wrong, or what have you. But what happened is that acceptance creates a qualitatively different vibrations. The same in meditation. The only thing is that we battling with our own mind. The battle is being put up with the mind. And mind cannot be battled. Why? Because mind cannot be won. You see? It's like you want to battle with a monkey, good luck. You're trying to use kung fu, you're trying to use Knight of Templar Order, you're trying to do the kind of like, whatever, British boxing, like you're trying to do something which is really the warrior would do, but mind would not have it. It has its monkey business. It hits you with a banana on the head and does this, It's like, it's not fair, and you get really infuriated because it's not fair. Because the monkey then sits in the corner, eats its banana, gets up, more verve and nourishment for the next assault. So, what to do is to be playful. Playful with the monkey. Playful and playfully ignoring it. Ignoring it. Ignoring the monkey mind. This is the rule of thumb. And whatever the monkey mind may come up with, witness with detachment, with firm understanding that none of this really belongs to you. Because the aspect of ownership is what makes us helpless here, what makes us powerless, because we already failed. We already failed. Whereas attitude, again, we're talking about that valve of acceptance, witnessing in detachment, because the content of these thoughts, it's not even mine. It's mine and it's not mine, you see? It comes to me, bothers me, but it's not mine. Why would I have to lose sleep over it? These are all very, very basic rule of thumb strategies of how to be in meditation. Meditation can vary. One can sit and experience the stillness of the surface of the pond, the lake, or what have you, where that beautiful full moon is fully reflected and not a flicker on the surface. In those moments, just enjoy it for what it is. But it doesn't mean that all meditations from now on will be like this. It's a wishful thinking. And we want to launch, what did I do? What did I eat? Yeah, I was there. Like we begin to think of all this, like how can I hold on to that spiritual experience in meditation because it's so wonderful. We cannot. So the progressive attitude is simply witnessing it. Witnessing it. So that is the very purpose of the Samkhya philosophy, is to abide in witnessing state of consciousness. Vedanta, as it became known in the West as Neo-Advaita or Non-Duality, was a noble attempt at enlightening any householder, any housewife, any Tom, Dick and Harry. What is it in German again? Every Hinz und Kunz, to a state of that totality, to the state of union. It's a noble thought. It's a noble idea, noble attempt. But it spectacularly failed and fell flat on its face. I'm sorry to say that. Even though, if we are to release this material, it will generate a lot of disagreement out there, because some people still swear by it. No intellectual understanding on the nature of ultimate reality is what Advaita Vedanta is, and never was. Advaita Vedanta is a cognition in terms of gnosis, that is at the root of the term to cognize. So it is the direct cognition of the light which illumines it all. And that light is being perceived as the essence of one's own self. Hence, enlightenment. Take any language and please tell me if it has the presence of the term light in it, in the equivalent. What will be enlightenment in German language? I'm curious. Does it have light in it?
Yeah, it's shining.
Yes. What is it in Dutch? Does it have light in it? Anyone? French-speaking people? Russian-speaking? I can help you with Russian. Yeah? You want Russian? Yeah, of course it has a term right inside it. Просветление. Просветление. And свет, right, inside. Свет. Yes, same. No language we can speak of and go, whenever it is being spoken of, it has light in its root. Whether this has been overseen somehow or deemed unimportant, it's beside the point. We're not trying to pin down how and what non-duality did with the term light. No. The attempt is noble, but what was lacking is the understanding what actually enlightenment represents and what happens really on the way to enlightenment, because the conversation went as far as to, for some teachers, when probably they exhausted the arsenal of the words and expositions, then this kind of giving it final sort of, out there. There's no enlightenment. Everyone is enlightened. Everyone is enlightened. So this was somehow, at some point, it just like really took the scene by storm. And it's like with everything, once you said that, which is undoubtedly true, of course everyone is enlightened. In fact, there's no such thing as everyone. The word everyone doesn't mean anything from the point of view of Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta no longer deals with these categories. If any of you study Advaita Vedantic texts, really, whether this is Ashtavakra Gita, whether it is Gerhardt Samhita, whether this is Shiva Sutras, whether this is Vashishta Yoga, Brahma Sutras, any of these texts at some point will bring the culmination, just like in the Vashishta Yoga, this thick, thicker than the Talmud. And the culminating chapters, culminating phases of the book, which is known as discourse between Prince Rama at his blooming 16th and the royal sage, right, the palace guru, Vashishta. Therefore it is known as Vashishta Yoga. Sage Vashishta enlightens Rama there, as well as all those who partook and witnessed that dialogue and exchange, as well as apparently all the animals who were in the vicinity, all the birds and all the trees. Everyone was released back into the unifying waters of oneness. Everything, the whole existence was given back to oneness. And it's interesting how in these particular phases of the culmination of that very, very voluminous scripture, because Vashishta Yoga has a status of a scripture. Finally, when Rama keeps pressing with the questions. By the way, the structure of every scripture is Q&A. So you have to understand that. Scripture always consists of Q&A. Whether this is tantric scriptures, which are known as shastras, or agamas, like in North India. Whether shastras or agamas, tantric scriptures will have dialogue between Devi and Shiva. Always. It is the Devi who takes the role of the disciple upon herself. Whether she tricking Shiva, that she is ignorant and she wants to have fun. There are many perspectives. We can speculate. We can imagine. She just wants to get it out of her spouse. All these last bits of secret, because he's keeping it all for himself to enjoy it, right? As the simple folk will have it. And then Parvati, usually between us, adults speaking, after luscious lovemaking, when Shiva is completely relaxed and lowers his guard, just probably plays with the long dreadlocks of his and matted locks of hair. And says, Shiva, by the way, could you tell me a little bit more? And scripture is born. In the same way, all the other scriptures are based on the dialogue, Q&A, simply Q&A. Bhagavad Gita, friends talking. Krishna and Arjuna are friends, best mates, like this, really friends. Until, of course, this is being readjusted. And then we learn it's a dialogue of the non-self with the self. So, questions, you see? Questions, rightly positioned questions contain answers or capable about bringing answers, satisfying answers. So I wanted to bring this to your attention and your awareness of the validity. So this is when the final, let's say, pressure that Rama exerts on Vashishta. And the final question, of course, is, so what is this all about then? Because prior to that, Vashishta said something that made sharp intellect of Rama, who already fell into deep samadhis several times in the due course of these exchanges, which took a long time. It's a voluminous scripture, because it's also a unique scripture. It's not concise. It's not like Garhart Samhita or Ashtavakra Gita, which is like slim. It's very voluminous. It has everything. It's about everything. And then Rama gets the drift and he asks, so if all this is in fact one, if all this is in fact one reality, what is this then? What is this then? What is this fuss? You see? And of course, what he means is that prior to that, Vashishta unveiled to Rama that there is no guru, no disciple, there's no discourse, nobody is partaking in anything. All this is in your head. All this is but a dream which doesn't even belong to you. All this is being held by nothing other than the self, and the self only. All this, and building it and building it. And of course, Rama then asked the final question. The final question is this: so why this then? You see? Why this fuss if all this? And the response is very, very telling. The response is that what, in my view, lacking in the whole field of the teaching of non-duality. Because Vashishta gives Rama a story how a poor folk goes to forest to get some dry wood to warm up their house. And as they get deeper into the forest and begin to gather the wood which is fit to burn and will keep them warm, not just some, but enough to sustain and to warm the houses inside, they stumble on something which is more precious than the dry wood. They stumble on silver. So they have no choice but to discard all that wood that they carried in their baskets, and they fill it all with silver, and with great smiles on their faces, they are tempted to proceed a little further, only to stumble on gold. I will wrap it up, right? There's no need to build it up. So obviously silver is chucked out to the very last chunk, and all filled with gold, as much as they could carry. And only to stumble on pure rubies. What do you do with gold then? Gold has no value against rubies. So all that gold is chucked out. And it is the pure rubies that they carry back. Each to their own. Each to their own. If not venturing into, right, for something to warm up the house. Make it into your own. This is the wisdom of the Vashishta yoga, the culminating phases. And that story that set to exemplify that the value of the knowledge cannot be truly evaluated. It's always in comparison. It's always relative. It's always in the context. So the utmost value here outweighs any other value. Any other value. So in other words, he rehabilitates, Vashishta rehabilitates there for the young Rama. Like, hold on, young man, don't be so arrogant. Okay? There is value in that. There is value in that. Not everyone is stumbled into the rubies right away. Not all the rubies are rubies either. Why? So that Rama, of course, he would need to be fit to do what he did later on. As we know, there's a direct correlation. Rama's story does not terminate there. It continues in Ramayana. So, let this be a reminder. And if you will, a further introduction to what we set to discuss, as to position ourselves into what this teaching is before we even begin to speak about it.